So, but it just, I mean, it's more destroying the industrial capacity because we're most of the factories in the cities. We destroy the cities, we destroy the factories, then we also kill the people who work in the factories. Like, then they can't really fight the war anymore. That's kind of the whole idea behind Total War. And that's of course when we talk about like really the first instance of American Total War is during the Civil War, in which Sherman's march to the ocean, in which he burns Atlanta and actually just burns a huge swath through the South, and like the whole point of that is to decrease Confederate morale and say, hey, Confederates, you can't stop us. You're not going to win this war, and also to get rid of the whole fact, like, it's a population center. It produces stuff. By burning all these farms and stuff like that, you're reducing the enemy's capacity. And plus, when you talk about total war, which is kind of a newer concept, really. I mean, it's been around for a while, but really calling it total war and stuff like that is kind of a new thing, where you look at the enemy and realize that civilians, being part of the process of production, are themselves a valid military target. That to defeat the enemy, you have to defeat their capability of war, and to do that, you're going to have to kill some civilians, because you have to blow up factories, and by doing that, like, civilians are probably going to die, and, like, oh, real, god dang it. I have no clue if I really did that right. I need to... So there's the whole morale factor, because we're talking about how, like, it kind of really sucks when your city burns down to the ground, and there is nothing your government can do to stop it, and like that's sort of what we're doing here by burning down Darnassus. Like, we're really trying to send this message and break this idea of hope and their morale, because it's like, well, if they can burn Darnassus down, what's really going to stop them? And disheartening, and trying to like prevent the alliance from fighting this war, and I think kind of try to force this peace. I don't necessarily, I mean, we can talk about how there's maybe this mentality of us versus them that has kind of existed for a while now, and really on both sides. Was there another point talking about burning down? Oh, cohesion. So, which I think I talked about in the earlier stuff, where, I mean, it's this really centralizing force that a city is, especially when we're talking about a capital, in which we're talking about the government planning and doing all the stuff that, governments do. And we're going back to the fact that there would be no unified Night Elf resistance. Like, you still have resistance pockets, but without Darnassus, there's no real communication between them. There's no organization. There's no, like, okay, we're going to be training troops and stuff like this. And so you end up with this kind of reduction in quality as well as quantity because there's no more Darnassus. And we can talk about how the fight will go on, but without a central leadership, that fight isn't as strong as it could be. So think also if Stormwind were to get sacked, that would probably be the end of the Kingdom of Stormwind. I mean, we could still talk about how like there would be a rebellion, like they go up in the hills, they would still try and fight. But as to like a unified necessary resistance, there really wouldn't be one. I mean, I would think like Anduin would escape, and there would still be like an alliance army that eventually will try to retake Stormwind. And as to the fighting in the area around it, it'd be completely different. And then, same thing with like when we talk about like now Lordaeron, where the Undercity is kind of, well, full of plague, and so like we've denied the Alliance the ability to like, retake Lordaeron. And which, you know, is kind of a pretty big point, and I think a big letdown to the Alliance. But by preventing the Alliance from taking... Well, I mean, without the Undercity, the undead areas are, of course, going to have a slight problem. Since, again, especially if we had to evacuate, even though I think people made the point, like, well, if you seal the elevators, there's no real way to get it, well, except for the back way. There's this sewer tunnel that leads back out, but I'm sure you can also seal that too. But by sealing the elevators and sealing that tunnel, like, the Undercity still exists. Like, you can still have people, and they can still serve as a military base, which launching and fighting, and then people have talked about, like, turning, like, the Undercity into, like, the Undercity is now the Stalingrad of WoW, which I think is also a good point. Of course, you also talk about, like, we could take the Undercity and turn it into the Alliance's Vietnam. Like, especially if they keep trying to fight and, like, take it, and then we're just going to, you know, hit and run and drop plague and force them, like, into these conflicts, and it's just end up being this attrition where, like, yeah, we're killing them, but every time we kill them, we're getting more for us. And, like, they're losing soldiers, and they're wasting all this time trying to take Lordaeron, and we're not really wasting that much effort on it. In fact, the effort we're wasting is actually beneficial, and then we can go and attack other places. So it kind of would be this futile effort that eventually, because, I mean, America eventually stopped fighting in Vietnam because it was kind of pointless. Of course, we got into that war for a whole bunch of, like, wrong reasons. So, to that extent, like, now, if Sylvanas had gone to Darnassus specifically to slaughter the civilians, and she's like, okay, we gotta go, we gotta attack them, we gotta kill all the civilians that we can, then yes, even though I think if she wanted to do that, she should have actually, like, would have wanted to actually have landed troops and just spread the plague everywhere and burn, like, just attack and just slaughter everyone. Like, that would have made more sense than just burning it down. If she really wanted to just kill as many civilians as possible and just slaughter all the civilians and commit genocide, then, like, yes, okay, she's evil because she's attacking specifically to kill civilians. But by attacking Darnassus specifically so that... Wait, am I supposed to ride something? Oh, nope. I'm just supposed to... Okay, I'll just you know, go myself. Then like, yes, she's evil. Specifically targeting civilians to kill civilians is wrong. But attacking the enemy's capital that just happens to have civilians in it is not wrong. She's not Arthas. She's not killing her own people. She's not slaughtering people for the sake of slaughtering people. She's just attacking the military base. And we could talk about, like, well, what about her use of the plague, in which, you know, we're looking at her and she's killing her own troops as they retreat. Well, I mean, let's talk about Broken Arrow. And how there's been many times where you've had to call danger close airstrikes on your own position, in which you possibly might kill your own troops in order to aid them in exfiltration. And, like, yes, she's using necromancy. But, I mean, it really is not the same. And I think part of the point that, like, yes, we can say that the Horde is the bad guys to the Alliance, just as the Alliance are the bad guys to the Horde. I think that's part of the point that they're trying to make. Like, this is a war, we're supposed to look at each other and think that we're bad. It's just that I don't particularly care for when, like, the Horde people are like, oh my god, like, we're the bad guys, like, oh my god, we're evil. And it's like, no, we're not. We're fighting a war. Like, we haven't really done anything evil. Yet. I mean, I think there's a big difference between what we've done so far and what actual evil people have done. I mean, we aren't rounding people up and putting them in the camps. I mean, we aren't attempting to exterminate whole populations. And like, granted, like, yeah, she's deployed the plague again, and I don't particularly care for the plague either. But at the same time, like, what else is she supposed to do? Just wait for the Alliance to eventually, like, overwhelm her people? Like, and I'm trying to really think of why it is that we necessarily really banned chemical weapons. I don't think there's necessarily for an intrinsic evil value. I think it's more the fact that it kind of just cheapens war if you can just start lobbing gas. And I think it's also the fact that of its unpredictable nature. Like, you throw like gas out there and it ends up not being effective because it blows right into your face. It's kind of a kind of presents this danger that you can't control. And we can talk. I really don't know. It's just I don't think the Horde's evil, and I don't think other Horde players should think that they're evil either, because really there's nothing that they've done so far that they haven't done in the past. And I think this whole, and again, I think the whole idea comes down to, well, you just killed a bunch of civilians. Like, well, that's gonna happen in a war.